Surprise! And yes, you aren't going mad. I am here a whole week early. This is a little surprise video just for you, not my usual fortnightly upload. I just could not resist joining in with Victober. And if you've not come across it before, Victober is a lovely tradition where readers from all over the world spend October exploring Victorian literature. Last year, I looked at the Gothic side of the Bronte's work, but this time I've decided to return to a novel I've not picked up in years. That's Charlotte Bronte's Villette. But I'm not here to simply tell you whether I enjoyed it or if it was good or not. I want us to step back and think about the world behind the book, the social history shaping it. Why does Lucy Snowe's story touch such a nerve about what it meant to be single in the 19th century? And what was happening in Victorian Britain that made her struggles so recognisable to Charlotte's readers? Stay with me, because once we start pulling at those threads, Villette feels even more alive and challenging than you might remember. So, you might be asking, Kate, what are you doing sat on the floor? Well, a few days ago, I was looking for a book that I knew I had that had a reference to do with the Brontes that I wanted to look at. Could I find it? No. Did I pull every book out of the cabinet trying to look for it? Yes. Do you have books everywhere? Yes. Did you tidy up? No. So that is why I'm surrounded by books and why I'm sat on the floor. But I shouldn't actually be in here filming. I had this amazing idea that I would take you guys with me. We're going to go to this beautiful location. We were going to look at beautiful views, beautiful buildings, and we were going to talk about Victober. But the heavens have opened. It's raining cats and dogs. That's a really weird phrase, isn't it? I wonder where that came from. Anyway, it's raining a lot. And I went out with the dog this morning to see how heavy the rain was. No, there is no way I am sitting on my carrier bag in the rain. So here we are in my room in a mess. But do I mind sitting around all these books? No, not really. It's quite nice to see all my pretties. I just feel like I'm channeling my inner Emily Bronte. You know, we all know she liked to sit on the floor. So that's what we're going to say I'm doing. I'm not though, am I? So let's get into Victober. For anyone who's not read Villette, let me give you a very quick outline. The story follows Lucy Snowe, an English woman with no family and no money. She travels to a made-up Belgian town called Villette, where she finds work as a teacher in Madame Beck's girls' school. Lucy is an outsider, in every way. She's foreign, she's unmarried, and she has no wealth. Much of the book is about her inner life, her loneliness, and her search for belonging. Now, this may feel a bit unusual if you're used to reading Jane Eyre or Wuthering Heights, but to the readers in the 1850s, Lucy's life would have felt very familiar. She stood for what Victorians were already calling the single woman problem. Beautiful name for it. By the middle of the 19th century, Britain had far more women than men. The 1851 census showed around 500,000 extra women in England and Wales compared to men. Let me go through that again. 500,000 more women than men. Wow. And the gap only grew, of course, as the years went on. There were many reasons for this. Men went abroad with the army to the empire or to work in the colonies, and not all of them came back. At home, dangerous work and illness cut lives short, and it was the men who did the dangerous work. The end result was many women, though through no fault of their own, would never marry. This caused real problems and worries for families, especially those with several daughters. Middle-class households depended on good marriages to secure the future of their girls. Dowries were costly, and if you had 4 or 5 daughters, it could be ruinous. A daughter who did not marry might end up being supported for decades with no way of bringing money into the household. So when the newspapers spoke about the surplus woman problem, it was not just numbers on a page, it was a real fear that touched families across the country. Lucy Snowe shows us what this looked like in real life. With no money to bring to a marriage, she cannot expect to marry well. And like thousands of real women in Victorian Britain, she had to find her own way. One of the few respectable jobs open to her was, of course, teaching. In 1851, the census listed more than 25,000 governesses in England and even more women teaching in small schools. It was a lonely kind of job. Too educated to belong with the working class people, but too poor to be part of the gentry. Lucy puts it into one sharp line. A teacher in a foreign school is one of the most forlorn beings in Christendom. Charlotte Brontë knew what she was writing about. She'd worked as a teacher and a governess herself, and so had her sisters. She was taking Lucy's story and making it stand for the lives of many real women. Women who were unmarried, unsupported, and surviving by sheer determination. And it leaves us with a question. In a society that told women their main role was to marry, what happened when hundreds of thousands of them could not? Once we understand the scale of the single woman problem, and I hate saying it like that, we can start to see why Victorian society was so uneasy about it. Marriage was seen as the expected destiny for women, yet with hundreds of thousands more women than men in the middle of the century, many would never marry. This was not just a curious detail in numbers. It caused deep anxieties for families, especially those with several daughters to provide for. For married women, the presence of unmarried women could feel unsettling. A single woman might be seen as too independent, and that independence could feel like a threat if she lived or worked in close contact with a household. Historians like Martha Vicinius have even noted that some Victorian wives regarded unmarried women as unsettling presences, reminders that marriage was not always secure and social rules could be bent or broken. Charlotte Brontë captured this unease so well in Villette. Madame Beck, the head of the school where Lucy worked, is outwardly respectable and efficient. Yet she keeps a close, constant eye on poor Lucy. She's reading her letters and watching her movements and never really trusts her. Lucy is not openly rebellious, but just by being unmarried and making her own way, she unsettles Madame Beck's tightly controlled world. It's a reminder of how society's fears about women outside of marriage could come out in quiet but controlled ways. Teaching was one of the few occupations open to women like Lucy. It gave them a measure of respectability, but it was also tough, poorly paid and lonely. It's not just her own loneliness she's describing, but the difficult position of many real women who were living outside of marriage. Victorian newspapers and commentators were well aware of this surplus of single women and came up with different solutions. Some suggested emigrating to the colonies to seek husbands, while others argued women should be trained for work such as teachers, nursing, or domestic management. But behind these so-called solutions was a deeper worry that independent women might upset the balance of society or even challenge the morals it was built on. I mean, a woman making her own way shows that life outside marriage was possible, and that idea alone was enough to disturb people. Lucy's struggle echoes Charlotte's own. She taught in Brussels, far from home, under strict supervision, and knew what it was to feel both vulnerable and determined at the same time. Lucy reflects this when she says, "It seems as if I had neither relative nor duty. No one claimed me, no one cared for me." That mixture of isolation and inner strength makes Lucy such a striking character, and it ties her story firmly to the real lives of women in the 1840s and 50s. By following Lucy through Madame Beck's school, we see both the limits placed on women and the way they try to endure and keep hold of their dignity. And in the background, we hear the louder voices of the times, newspapers, moralists, anxious families, and all reflecting a wider social fear. Lucy's story may be deeply personal, but it also bound up the bigger question of what happened when women lived outside the pattern society had set for them. By the time Lucy Snowe begins teaching at Madame Beck's school, she's already been shaped by solitude and uncertainty. Teaching in Villette is not just there as part of the plot, it reflects one of the very few options open to middle-class women without diaries or husbands who need to earn a living. For many, becoming a governess or a teacher was a lifeline, but it came with risk and little security. Her struggles, though, go beyond loneliness. She has to manage her modest income, find her place in the school, and always protect her reputation. More often than not, she's watching others rather than joining in, weighing up that unspoken rule that governs daily life. And in many ways, her survival depends not only on intelligence or skill, but also on patience and caution and strength of will. At the same time, Lucy shows remarkable independence. She secures her own position, she makes herself a home in the school, and she finds a way to observe and reflect on the world around her. Because she stands slightly outside the lives of others, she notices details and behaviours that many women tied to marriage and domestic duties might miss. This distance gives her voice in the novel such sharpness and sometimes uncomfortable honesty. The wider history makes this even clearer. Families with unmarried daughters face difficult choices about education, housing and dowries. Many women, like Lucy, went out to work, not because they wanted to, because they had no other choice. Yet the jobs they could take were poorly paid and left them exposed to uncertainty. The governess problem was debated endlessly in newspapers and by social commentators, but few real solutions were ever offered. Lucy's strength is not just personal courage. It represents the endurance of thousands of women like her. She finds ways to keep her dignity and shapes a life in society that gave her very few options. Her intelligence, persistence and quiet independence are as much about survival as they are about character. Charlotte Brontë writes all this with a closeness that suggests personal experience. Lucy's sharp comments, her reflections and her moments of frustration echoes what Charlotte herself lived through as a teacher abroad and as a single woman in England. When Lucy says, "I cannot endure to sit still and do nothing," we hear both the voice of a character and the determination of a woman who refuses to give up, and even when society seems stacked against them. By the end of Villette, Lucy has endured, she's learned, she's found a measure of independence. Her story is not just about one woman's resilience, but about the struggle faced by an entire generation of women and the quiet strength they needed to survive. So, you might have noticed I've changed. Well, actually I haven't changed. It is now the next day. Life got in the way of my filming, so I had to pause it, go off and be a mum, and now it's the next day. And yeah, I literally left everything. Got myself a fresh brew though, so, you know. So, where were we? Let's get on. Sorry. If you're wondering why you keep hearing this tapping noise, I've got my glasses on my lap and I've got a habit of doing, like, fiddling with them. Sorry about that. I have to put them somewhere. And I thought if I put them on my lap, I wouldn't lose them in the chaos that's my room. But yeah, all it's done is probably made a very irritating tap throughout my videos. Apologies. I'll put them down. Try not to fiddle. So once people realised just how many single women there were in Victorian Britain, how did society actually deal with it? Families, communities and the women themselves all had to find a way to manage, and those solutions could be very mixed. For families, the pressure was often financial and probably very immediate. Keeping unmarried daughters at home could be really expensive, especially if there were several of them. Some parents encouraged early marriages, often with money and security in mind rather than love. And others helped daughters into work like teaching, nursing and governessing. Is that the correct phrase for it? Governessing? Anyway, and charity roles, which gave them a chance to earn but also remained respectable, which was important. For middle and upper class women, another option could be to become a companion to an older lady if you had the right family background, while working class women might be expected to look after elderly relatives at home. These choices might not have brought much independence, but they did provide a place and a purpose. For working class women without money or family support, life could be much harder. Many ended up in factories, domestic service, or sewing for long hours just to scrape by. And if no work was available, some women had little choice but to enter the workhouse. And in desperate cases, some turned to becoming women of the night, not because it was glamorous or easy by any means, but because it was the only way to keep food on the table and you did what you had to do. Even in respectable jobs, women's labour was often undervalued. Wealthy households could be choosy about hiring staff, offering low pay and harsh conditions, knowing there were plenty of other women waiting for a chance. Governesses and teachers like Lucy Snowe faced the same problem. When there were too many women chasing too few positions, the power stayed firmly with the employers. Meanwhile, men's behaviour added to the imbalance. Some with money or land could pick and choose when and whom to marry, while others obviously went abroad for work or for a tour, or obviously going into the army. There were even cases of secret marriages or elopement that made it into the papers, often treated with shock and scandal. In small places like Haworth, surplus women would have been impossible to ignore. Many unmarried women ended up caring for younger brothers and sisters, or helping to run the household, or finding little ways to bring in money. Social expectations kept their freedom limited, but survival demanded creativity. Often women supported each other through these hard times, friendships, sisters sharing advice, or colleagues finding each other work, or offering a bed for a night or food for the family. Charlotte Brontë would have seen all this at close quarters. When she accepted Arthur Balls-Nichol's proposal, it likely held both affection and a very real sense of security. In Villette, Lucy's careful balancing of work, relationships and independence reflects that same reality for women who were simply trying to make a life in society that gave them very few protections. Of course, some groups gained from the imbalance. Men with wealth could be more selective in marriage, and families sometimes benefited from making marriages that would suit them financially. A few women managed to carve out opportunities too, running small schools or households, teaching, or finding other creative ways to stay afloat. Lucy Snowe's story shows us that a single woman's life might be difficult, but it could also carry self-respect, education, and even a degree of freedom. At the same time, newspapers and commentators of the period often painted unmarried women as a problem or even a moral failing. That attitude fed into the novel of the age and shaped how people saw women who were simply living without marriage. When we think about the surplus of women in Victorian times, the numbers only tell part of the story. The real picture comes alive when we look at the individual lives, the choices women made, and the consequences they faced. Newspapers of the time show a mix of anxiety, fascination, and sometimes outright gossip about women who had to make their own way. Some women left small towns to seek work in the cities and the big towns, sometimes never returning home, and others took positions in schools or households far from their families. One story describes a young woman who became a teacher at a small boarding school and then later opened her own school. A rare success, yes, but one that shows the resourcefulness and determination needed to survive. For some women, the shortage of men actually created a kind of freedom. If there simply weren't enough eligible men around, no one could blame a woman for staying single. This gave women the chance to choose independence in a way that wouldn't have been possible before. Sisters, like our Brontes, could remain together, living their lives without the compromise a husband might have demanded. The label spinster or old maid became more common, But for those who could afford it, it was a small price to pay for peaceful and independent life. Working class women, as we said, faced even harsher realities. Many moved to industrial towns to take factory jobs, enduring long hours and low pay. Others entered domestic service under strict and demanding conditions, and a few became women of the night, offering companionship at a last resort to survive. I mean, these weren't glamorous lives, oh no, but they were often the only way to keep a roof over their head or food on the table. Female networks, friends, sisters or colleagues were vital. I mean, they helped women find work, keep safe, and obviously gave them that support that they would have needed. Interestingly, some women used the situation to build independence. Governesses, teachers and small businesswomen carved out lives that were socially acceptable, but still gave them a measure of control and self-direction. Lucy Snowe reflects this in the fiction. While many of her contemporaries had to compromise or struggle, Lucy's intelligence, discretion and resilience shows that a woman could survive and even thrive, really, when you think about it, but all within the limitations society imposed. Press commentary at the time reflected the anxieties society felt. Newspapers fretted about morality and the surplus of women and the way social order might be disrupted. Letters from women gave a more personal perspective, showing the stress of supporting oneself, maintaining a reputation, and negotiating social expectations. These voices remind us that the surplus of women wasn't just a demographic curiosity. It shaped daily life in households and communities across England. Even at the top of the social scale, the imbalance mattered. Wealthy families could choose from a large pool of domestic staff, which kept wages low and conditions strict. Men often had more choice in marriage than they could have handled responsibility, while women had to be careful to protect their futures. In villages like Haworth or in busy towns, the surplus of women influenced behaviour, opportunities and the way people lived their lives. Looking at these real life experiences alongside Lucy's story in Villette, we can see a novel that goes beyond personal emotion. It shows the way women had to survive, make decisions for themselves and find independence wherever they could. Life was difficult and the shortage of men created pressure. But it also meant women could develop strength and resilience and ability to take charge of their own lives in ways that weren't possible before. That's the only thing about wearing a cardigan. When you wave your arms, it just flies everywhere. Oh, my microphone is just tickling my skin and making it quite itchy. It mustn't itch. It's probably really noisy. Scratch. I get this muddled up all the time. You have an itch and then you scratch it, not a scratch that you then itch. Anyway, just one of my quirks of being Kate, a Kate quirk. Right, where were we? Oh, joy. Editing Kate is going to hate this because consistency is completely out the window, because here I am wearing a different outfit on a different day and the light's probably all completely different. So there is no chance of me going, that bit you talked about then, I'm going to swap with that bit, because you'll be able to tell because I'm wearing a different outfit. So yeah, sorry editing Kate, that must be annoying. There's a high-pitched squeal outside. I'm ever so sorry if you can hear that. I have my door open because I'm very warm. As you can see, the sun is shining through and I'm fiddling with my glasses. I must put them down. Sorry. Try that again. Lucy's story may be there, but one that shows the resourcefulness. Only shows the resourcefulness, and even thrive within the limitations society imposes. I can't say that. Thank you so much for washing. Thank you for washing. I hope you wash anyway. I shouldn't have to thank you for it. Where did that come from? What strikes me most about Villette is how Charlotte Brontë managed to weave together the personal and the social. Lucy Snowe isn't just a character, she's a reflection of the very real women who had to navigate a world where there was simply more women than men, where stability was uncertain and where survival often meant creativity and quiet courage. It's a reminder that stories are never just stories, they are windows into lives, choices and struggles. And Lucy's determination to live on her own terms, even within the constraints of her time, still feel powerful today. Because this video is my little extra, my little bonus for Victober, I'm also going to be celebrating by sharing different classic Victorian novels every Monday in October. Each one with a Bronte feel or a link or something that I think connects them. I mean, you can see my choices on my Instagram or my Facebook, and I've been really modern and I'm going to try and put the QR code somewhere up here. So check that out. Or if you're old school like me, just go into the description and there'll be links there. And I have 3 more questions for you this week. This is a video that just keeps giving. Let me know your answers in the comments below, because I love the fact that we've been talking in the last few videos. It's great. So, question number 1. Do you enjoy seeing how novels like Villette reflect real social history, or do you prefer reading them just as stories? And question number 2. How do you think you would have coped if you were a single woman in Victorian times? And number 3, do you think Charlotte Brontë was writing from personal experience more than imagination when she created Lucy Snowe? Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching my video and all my back videos. It's lovely still to get comments and thoughts from ones that I made a while ago. It's great. I'm loving it. So thank you. If you like this video, like I say every week, please do the whole likey, subscribey, hypey thing, because it really helps me out and it lets YouTube know that we want to watch more Bronte content. Have a good weekend and take care, and I will see you next Friday, because we're back to normal again, for more Bronte adventures. See you soon. Bye.